Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, and welcome once again to a weekly COVID-19 public health update with Montgomery County Executive Marc Elrich. I'm Lorna Virgili, Hispanic Public Information Officer, and as usual, our health officer, Dr. Travis Gayles, is joining us. Dr. Earl Stoddard, who is the Director of the Office of Emergency Management and Homeland Security. And also joining us today as guests, we have Tiffany Ward, who is a Chief Equity Officer in Montgomery County Government, James Stoddard, the Director of the Office of Human Rights, and Ilana Branda. She is a Deputy Chief for Services to End and Prevent Homelessness in Montgomery County with the Department of Health and Human Services. Reporters, all of you should already have permission to record. If you do not, use the chat. And we do have today a hard stop at 1:20 in the afternoon. And with that, I toss it to you, Mr. County Executive.
So good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us on our weekly press briefing. This week is Father's Day, and I first and foremost want to thank all the fathers, grandfathers, mentors, and any type of father figure that is in a child's life, and wish everybody a happy Father's Day. In honor of Father's Day, we've proclaimed this week Men's Health Week in Montgomery County. Men are twice as likely to wait more than 2 years between doctor visits. Check. In fact, more than 40% of men don't go to the doctor at all unless they have a serious health issue. We are asking all men and those who love them to please remember to check in about your health. Even if you're feeling good, a routine exam, especially at older ages, is so important to catch anything that we can and check it off early. On the front of COVID and vaccine rates, today we find our positivity rate to be about 0.43%, less than 1%. And our case rate is 0.83 per 100,000. We're now clearly sitting below the 1 per 100,000 case rate, and our community is now at a very low risk of transmission. And this is really good news for everybody. As you can see from the graph, you can see clearly where we are in the context from the past 15 months. We have come a long way in this journey, and it's nice to have gotten here. And I feel pretty good about our ability to stay in this space. 63.7% of our residents have received both doses of Pfizer, Moderna, or a single dose of J&J, according to CDC data. We continue to lead the nation for our 12 and over population for the vaccination rate for jurisdictions over 300,000 people, being at 75%. And really great news is that we've gone over 90% of our population over 65 being vaccinated. We're doing very well, but as you can see from the graph, we're still seeing a dramatic decrease in volume as we're now seeing supply exceeding demand. That's a big change from not that long ago. This last mile of this vaccination effort is going to be tough sledding, and we remain committed to our demographic and zip code targeting efforts. This kind of gives you an idea of where our vaccine doses have gone, and you can see we're vaccinating fewer people now. At some point you expect to vaccinate fewer people, but we still have too many people left unvaccinated, and that means the risk of transmission between unvaccinated folks remains the same. So we're encouraging people not to rely on everybody else getting vaccinated, but do your part, make sure you get vaccinated, and that'll make this county healthier and make our recovery a lot smoother. Yesterday, Governor Hogan announced that the state of Maryland will be lifting the state of emergency on July 1st. That was pretty much expected, though I will say, like every other announcement for almost the past year, we don't know about it until the announcement is made. So we weren't able to give any reporters any heads up on what might be coming because we had no idea what was coming. But that said, this is something that, I think is, basically justifiable. I wish the numbers were higher in some of the other counties in the state because some of the other counties do have much lower numbers. But I'm proud of the vaccine response, the COVID response, and our efforts in Montgomery County. Being the state's largest jurisdiction, our numbers have helped driven the state rates higher. The lifting of the governor's state of emergency will have very little impact on our current recovery efforts. We don't plan on reducing any of our efforts to get people vaccinated. However, I do disagree with Hogan's statement that this is the end of recovery. We're not there yet. want to be, perfectly clear about this. The economy was severely blasted by COVID, and the businesses that have closed, the people who are never coming back again, those businesses are not going to be reopened. Many of them by July 1st. People who close permanently aren't going to reopen at all. And so this notion that now it's just the end of recovery and everything goes back to normal, we may be approaching a new health normal, but we're still not approaching a new the old economy normal. And until then, things like rental assistance and protection from evictions are going to remain really important. The eviction moratorium he announced will last till August 15th. I would have preferred that the governor had tied evictions, the moratorium, and frankly, the unemployment benefits to the achievement of unemployment metrics. That when we saw unemployment approximating where it was the pandemic, then it might make sense to lift the special treatment of evictions and unemployment benefits. But many people aren't working, not because they don't want to work, not because they're enjoying the luxury that's afforded by unemployment. And just so everybody knows, the average unemployment benefit in Maryland is about $400, and the $300 makes it $700 a week. Nobody's enjoying much of a luxury life on that. The $300 a week he proposes to take away is money that people would have spent on businesses in the state of Maryland. So you may be taking money away from individuals, but you're also taking money away from the business community that needs people's purchasing power in order for them to fully recover. So I dearly wish the governor would rethink this, extend it, tie it to a metric. I think we'd all agree that when unemployment is normal, then we can move in a different direction on the benefits. But right now, unemployment is not normal, and it's probably going to be a while before we get there. I don't think it's been enough time for many of the residents to get caught up. We're providing rent support for people who've missed rent payments already, but there will be more missed rent payments to come. And so we're anticipating needing additional support as we do this. So again, like I said, I hope the governor will think about this, extend the moratorium a little bit longer, give us a metric, and let's all prepare for the point when we can get ourselves to the point we can actually say we've had an economic recovery. But like I said, we're not there yet. We have to continue to engage and support the people who need the resources, and we need folks who are facing eviction to reach out to us and Maryland Legal Aid to get help. Too many people are not showing up for their court dates. There is a defense if you lost your job because of COVID. There is a defense for not paying rent. But if you don't show up in court, there is no defense. And so it's critical that people show up and do what they can to explain to the judges why they've not been able to pay their rent. And if anybody has received a posted eviction from the sheriff's office, we want you to call 311, let us know what you've received so we can try to intercede with the landlord to prevent your eviction. We very much do not want this to occur as many people are worried about it happening. As we turn our page from response to recovery, I'm looking forward to working with the governor, the other county executives and mayors, along with our state and federal delegation to ensure that Montgomery County residents and businesses can rebound as quickly as possible from this. There was one bright news I got from the county liquor board is that they had approved a record number of new liquor licenses, which means that people are applying for new licenses and bringing restaurants back to life, new restaurants back to life, most likely on the vacant spaces that were created by other restaurants. But that's part of a recovery that's been noted both in Montgomery County, but regionally as well. So I'm optimistic that that new growth will come on what remains of what was there before COVID shut things down. We had a great event at Novavax this week as our county's reopening and our economy's recovering. It was great news that Novavax test results on their vaccine were a big success. They tested at 90.4% on par with Pfizer and Moderna, higher than J&J. And this vaccine showed 100% efficacy in preventing moderate or severe disease. So congratulations to the employees at Novavax, Montgomery County. And we're very lucky to call them home. And having been out there in the middle of this when they were still working on it, I really appreciated how much work people talked about, the hours and effort they were putting in to developing the vaccine that would ultimately come to market. So thank you very much for your dedicated work to making this happen. Although the Novavax got headlines this week, their success is really a testament to the success of our entire bio and life sciences community. And when I joined the governor at Novavax, we learned they were hiring 500 new positions by the end of the year, and they have a proposal for a major expansion of their campus, which is going to see even further growth in their company, which is just one of many companies growing in the life sciences field here. And speaking of life sciences, we signed a much sought after MOU with the university system. I've been working on this for almost 2 years and trying to get the university system to play a more coordinated role with our life sciences sector in Montgomery County. We knew that we had concerns about talent pipeline, but also research in Montgomery County. And unlike many of the other life sciences centers around the country, particularly the leading ones, we stand alone in not actually having an academic research presence here. And we were looking to work to correct that. This MOU, which was signed last week between the county, the University System of Maryland, and including the universities of Shady Grove and Montgomery College, was signed in the presence of leaders from the bio and life sciences industries, and we're really excited. We think this opens up a door for further economic development in the county, both in the form of support for research, but also support in creating the talent pipeline that these companies need. And we know that the better job we do in this area, the more likely we are to keep, retain, and attract new companies to Montgomery County. We've earned a reputation as being Vaccine Alley. We've been known as DNA Alley. So we are, in the forefront of this research, and this hopefully will accelerate the role that we're taking there. We also want to announce that it's not an announcement. This year's going to be the 156th anniversary of Juneteenth, and we're going to be celebrating it this Saturday. On that day, Union General Gordon Granger and 2,000 federal troops have arrived in Galveston, Texas, to take possession of the state and enforce the emancipation of its enslaved persons. It was great news yesterday that by unanimous consent, which is somewhat hard to believe, the United States Senate voted to make Juneteenth a national holiday. Montgomery County's 24th Juneteenth celebration will be held in Black Rock Center for the Arts, which is located at 12901 Town Commons Drive in Germantown, from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. this Saturday. This year's theme is going to be Freedom at the Rock, Acknowledge, Educate, and Celebrate. It traces the African-American struggle for freedom through education, art, dance, music, and honoring our elders. The festivities are going to include educational activities, a historical journey of the African-American music and artistic entertainment, food trucks, all designed for the whole family. So take advantage of being in a place where we can all get together again. And what a great thing to be celebrating is one of the first things we're able to do coming as we are out of the worst of this pandemic. So please, there are activities inside and on the lawn of the Arts Center. I'm also going to be hosting the African Americans Living Legends Award to honor distinguished individuals who are living legends in Montgomery County and have helped shape the cultural heritage of the African American community. And I want to thank Jim Stowe and his team for their hard work and creativity in putting this event together. And Jim is on our call today to chat about this week's events. Finally, I want to say something about equity. As we celebrate Juneteenth, I wanted to take a moment to address our progress on equity. I've been in Montgomery County for 60 years, and a lot of people in this county today don't know the history of this country on race, let alone the history of this county on race, and it doesn't serve us well. When I moved here 60 years ago, we were not the open and inclusive place that we're striving to be today. And in those days, that wasn't even something that they were even striving to become. That's not the trajectory that people were trying to set Montgomery County on. Housing still had covenants that dictated who a house could be sold to based on race and religion. We were just integrating our schools and facilities. People talked about developing Silver Spring as a whites-only community. And my civics class, I think in 1962, had a debate on civil rights where the pro side represented the view that civil rights were basic human rights, while the con side discussed African Americans as a subhuman species that needed to be taken care of. And while I found it outrageous at the time, not everybody in that room did, and the teachers felt no need to correct the statements made by the opponents. The idea that you could assert something like that and not be challenged by people who are supposed to be educating children is still astounding to me to this day. But that was the reality in Montgomery County, and we weren't unique, hardly unique in this country. So we've come a ways, but people need to remember where we came from. Racism in this country is not ancient history. It's real life, and we need to be able to deal with that. When I was on the council, I co-sponsored and led the charge for a county to create an equity officer and an equity office. When I became county executive, I not only had the privilege of appointing the county's first equity officer, Tiffany Ward, but I made her part of my senior management team. Following the murder of George Floyd last year, both efforts to celebrate Juneteenth and efforts in equity have really picked up. And just this week, my friend in Anne Arundel County Executive Stuart Tittman announced the creation of their equity officer. This follows an announcement last year that Howard County was creating an equity officer, as well as the state of Maryland's focus on equity during the pandemic, which received a lot of guidance, frankly, from our folks, Dr. Gayles, Dr. Stoddard, Dr. Crowell, who helped give the state guidance on how to do this kind of work. All of these efforts add up, and I'm proud that Montgomery County is once again ahead of the curve on this. I asked Tiffany to join us today to briefly update you on our equity efforts. And as an announcement to approve equity or create equity managers garner attention, the day-to-day work and year-to-year progress do not. And so I wanted Tiffany to be able to talk a little bit about that. So with all that, I'll turn this over to Dr. Gayles and Dr. Stoddard for any updates they have before we hear from Tiffany. Thank you.
Good afternoon and happy Wednesday to everybody. Always a pleasure to be with you all. I don't have actually many updates to leave the floor for others to speak today, other than to say we continue to see significant improvements in our community transmission level, as well as our vaccine rates. Now, with that said, we are continuing to monitor any trends in new cases, particularly seeing if they disproportionately impact groups that are unvaccinated, including those who have chosen not to get vaccinated, as well as those, including our young children who are not yet eligible to be vaccinated. So anticipating potential questions related to the governor's mask and face covering rules, we're going to look at our data and follow it closely, as well as look at the impact of variants within our state and our region to provide further guidance related to that. So please stay tuned for that over the next week or so as that information comes out. Thank you, and happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Gayles, and thank you, Mr. County Executive. Dr. Stoddard, do you have any opening remarks today?
Thank you, Lorna. Just a few comments. We continue our vaccination efforts, as Dr. Gayles and the county executive alluded to. There are a number of clinics. We're focused a lot on some of the areas where we have that lag our other higher vaccination rates, and so focusing a lot of efforts in the down county area, particularly in some of our urban cores where we see lower vaccination rates. And so you'll see there's a whole host of clinics being offered at Mary Center, Proyectus Salud's doing work at Westfield Wheaton Mall, the Caseman Clinic in Rockville. There's vaccines on the Adventist campus and Lake Forest Mall, as well as some of our standing sites like the Germantown mass vaccination site. As the American Medical Association said this week, 96% of practicing physicians have made the determination to get vaccinated. If it's good enough for those people you go to get recommendations on your health, it should definitely be good enough for you. And if you're still holding out or on the fence about getting vaccinated, I encourage you to talk to your normal medical provider and get some guidance on that. Given that 96% number, I expect that they're going to recommend that you get vaccinated. On the recovery front, the county executive alluded to this. while the state of emergency is being lifted, and that reflects a significant step in the response to COVID-19, that does not mark the end of recovery for COVID-19 in Montgomery County nor the state of Maryland. We expect that on the economic front, we're going to have a lot of work to do, but also on things like youth services, addressing socialization of children and the education losses that have been experienced over the year. Senior services are going to be a large focus of our recovery effort. Addressing the long-term telework strategy, both for the county, but also, providing guidance to businesses as well on how to successfully do more telework and integrate that over time and balance the post-COVID environment with the strong push for telework to improve things like climate change, our work on climate change and the like. And then obviously mental health and opioid abuse have been a significant issue as well as we come out of this pandemic. We've been telling people to be concerned about being around other people for 15 months. We've got to unwind that experience and have people feel more comfortable being in rooms and environments with other people moving forward. So we've got a lot of work to do in our recovery framework. We're building up on our recovery as opposed to winding down our recovery. And we hope that our partners will do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stoddard. Now let's hear from Tiffany Ward, who is our Chief Equity Officer. Tiffany?
Thank you. So just speak briefly. In December of 2019, the County Council, led by then Council Member Marc Elrich and Council President Nancy Navarro, passed the Racial Equity and Social Justice Act. And only 3 months later, we were hit by an international pandemic of COVID. That pandemic let us further expose the many health disparities and health inequities that we have between our white residents and our communities of color. And just 3 short months after that, we had the murder of George Floyd, which really further exposed the inequities in our criminal justice system. And so that really heightened the nation's consciousness on racial inequities in the country. The county, though, had already begun their journey for racial equity through the Racial Equity and Social Justice Act. That act created the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice. It created the position I sit in. It also requires that our department train or help to train all of the county employees in racial equity and social justice. It requires that every department have a racial equity lead that works with us to put together a racial equity and social justice action plan. It requires that our department work with departments to create more equitable policies within their department, as well as we have to put together racial equity impact assessments for supplemental appropriations and for both our capital and operating budgets. Quite a task. So over the past, I would say 15, 16 months, we have worked to train our county officials, both our elected officials and our directors. Many of them have gone through a 2-day racial equity training that really gives the history of racialized policy in the country from literally its inception to today. All of our racial equity leads have gone through 40+ hours of training, and they will be trained to lead core teams and to create those racial equity action plans that we are speaking of. Our Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice is working with OMB, which is our Office of Management and Budget, to put together a tool for our departments as they assess all of their programs and processes for racial equity. So that tool is just a list of questions that helps you think about how your program or process is creating or helping to mitigate racial inequities in our county population. And so we are also working with the Department of Environmental Protection to help them center racial equity in their climate action plan. And all of this work, thank God, is being supported by our county council and our county executive. We've grown from a small team of 1, that's just me, to a team of 4 over the last 14 months. And we have been granted 2 more FTEs. Special thank you to our county executive and our county council for doing that over our last budget session. And look forward to further growing the department and really seeding the policies and the procedures that we think will help close some of the inequities here in our county.
Thank you, Chief Ward. Now let's hear from James Stowe, who is the Director of the Office of Human Rights. Jen?
Thank you so much. We're excited about this coming weekend. This Saturday, June 19th, is Juneteenth Day for ourselves here in this county, all around across the country. And the county executive is hosting our community for this great event. We invite you to come out and be a part of it. We're calling it Freedom at the Rock. That's the Black Rock Center for the Arts. Sort of our theme again is acknowledge, educate, and celebrate. And throughout the day on Saturday, starting at 10 a.m., we'll have just that, beginning with activities and educational opportunities for our children, games for them as well, a lot of fun events, a lot of focus on books and learning will be part of that morning process for them. We have a series of arts and crafts that will follow thereafter. Also, we'll look at painting and other art exhibits as part of that process. Our Sandy Springs Slave Museum will be present as well with exhibits to share that as well. Arts on the Block also will be part of that process too. So from there, we'll go to performing arts. We'll have dance classes that will occur as well. And so persons get involved in that kind of activity as well. We'll be featuring also a Freedom Film Festival that'll have a series of films that our library is sponsoring. And so very pleased that they've joined us in this effort as well. And so there'll be some interesting films that'll be part of that process. We also will have then a performing arts stage that'll be going on simultaneous to this with contributions from our Caribbean community, from our African community. Black on Broadway, for instance, will be part of the process. We also have in the evening Voices of Classic Soul, as well as Chelsea Green and the Green Project. So an entire day of activities that will be really highlighted by our African American Living Legends Award ceremony. The county executive, as he mentioned, will be giving and saluting 5 members of our community, Dr. Elwood Raphael Gray, Miss Willie King, Reverend Dr. Sterling King Jr., John Macklin, and Dr. Hercules Pinckney, all of whom have contributed over their lifetimes to the betterment of this community. And so it always is the highlight of our Juneteenth event. And so we're asking folks to come out and be a part of that. Again, 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., a full day of activities for the entire family. All families, I should say, all families in our community are a part of this great event. So come out, learn about Juneteenth, and be a part of it. Again, acknowledge, educate, celebrate. Freedom at the Rock.
Thank you, Director Stowe. And now let's get started with the Q&A portion of the presentation. Reporters, remember to use the chat to ask permission to ask questions. And the first one comes from Dominique Maria Bonesi from WAMU. Dominique?
Thank you, County Executive. First question to you. Just curious to know, now that we're getting back to some semblance of how things were prior to the pandemic, this sort of format that you've had your pressers, you've been doing it all online via Zoom. Is there something that will stay like this, or do you intend to go back to some sort of in-person presser, or what's the plan as far as your operations?
So we're talking about a way of merging an in-person along with Zoom. We realize the Zoom format's probably given more of you an opportunity to participate than would normally happen. Because after all, you'd have to plan your trip here, you'd have to set up here, you'd have to have time in your trip back. So it's not simply an hour presser. So we may look to format it in a way that people can come in person, but we can also do this virtually. But we are looking at it.
Thank you. And then to Dr. Gayles, you mentioned the mask mandate. Hogan, by July 1st, seems to be dropping the mask mandate, but I'm curious to know, what is the current mask mandate in Montgomery County? Just give me a refresher. And if you were to change it, what would the changes look like?
Thank you, Dominic, for your questions. To your first question, as we entered the 3rd phase of our reopening over a month ago now, when we reached greater than 50% of our population being fully vaccinated, all of our restrictions, including face coverings, were moved to be consistent with the state. So I will actually want to clarify for those who are at home who've been sending us emails demanding that we make changes to our mask face covering policy. We've been following the state's policies related to reopening, including face coverings, for multiple weeks now. So if you do have complaints or concerns about that, I would encourage you to address that with the governor's office and MDH related to that, as that's the policy that we've been following. Now, as we move forward, as I mentioned, we will continue to look at the data to make the best recommendations to the county executive and to the county council sitting as Board of Health, that is informed, again, by multiple principles. One is looking at, for example, the data shows that the majority of folks who are being hospitalized with COVID right now are folks who are not vaccinated. And so COVID-19 continues to be a significant problem for those populations. So we will continue to do everything we can to make the vaccine available to those who are eligible. But to the other piece, that population who is not eligible, including our children, trying to figure out what makes most sense in terms of keeping them safe to mitigate any further transmission within that population or any potential risk of having outbreaks and having our children get sick. So that said, as the county executive mentioned, we learned of the new policy yesterday afternoon with the general public, and we're going to continue to look at the data as well as be informed by trends of variants to propose further recommendations as we move forward.
Thank you, Dr. Gayles. Next question, also for you, Dr. Gayles, comes from Dan Shearer from Bethesda Beat. Dan?
Hi, Dr. Gayles. This is sort of a follow-up on Dominique's question. Do you anticipate the possibility that there might be changes to guidance on the mask mandate for MCPS for schools next year? And if so, what data specifically might that depend on?
Thank you, Dan, for your question. I would reiterate the answer that I just provided to Dominique in terms of the data points that we would be looking to provide that public health related guidance. As you know, ultimately, due to some of the previous actions of the governor, public health offices can provide guidance, but ultimately those policies within the school settings are decisions that are left up to the respective school entities. We work very closely with our MCPS colleagues and our non-public school colleagues throughout the pandemic, and we anticipate that this will be yet another area where we will provide them guidance in terms of how to move forward. And as it relates to reopening in the fall, obviously, as we've seen through the pandemic, a lot can happen in a short amount of time. So what we'll say is we're going to, again, not to sound like a broken record, continue to look at the data points, including the impact on unvaccinated populations, the impact of COVID cases in our younger groups, in addition to including the numbers of cases, any particular hospitalization information and data, and hopefully we won't see any, COVID-related mortality, but, certainly look at those types of data points that are impacting those populations.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dan. Next set of questions come from Kate Ryan, WTOP, and questions for the county executive and also for you, Dr. Gayles. Kate?
Thank you very much. I'll start with Dr. Gayles, and I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I just want to clarify something here. In terms of the 12 and under who cannot be vaccinated, children who aren't eligible yet for vaccines, do you have any sense of whether or not there may be an approval of a COVID vaccine for them before the school year starts? And if I'm a parent who's sending my child to summer camp in July after the state, lifts the mask regulations, what should I do? What's my guidance there? And I know Governor Hogan said yesterday, well, people should follow the science. Well, people are going to be looking to you to go, help me out. And then what is the science?
Thank you, Kate, for your series of questions. And I will use your adage to sound as a broken record. We just found out the changes yesterday. And the science shows, again, that if you are not vaccinated, regardless of the cause, you are still at increased risk of contracting COVID, as well as potentially having, a a complicated course of illness dependent upon, a host of other factors. So we've got a challenge here. We're going to continue to try to drive down community transmission, again, as low as we can, because we know that the ability to spread the virus through populations is contingent upon community transmission levels. So we're going to continue to emphasize and practices to do that. One of the big components to driving down community transmission, again, is getting vaccination numbers as high as possible. So all of the things that the county executive mentioned, Dr. Stoddard and others have mentioned, and all of the exhaustive efforts that we've been doing to get us to this point of having over 75% of our residents receiving first dose, we're going to continue to do that. We don't think there's a mission accomplished piece of this. So we're going to continue to push and support those efforts, again, to keep community transmission level down, because that in essence provides an added layer of protection to our young people who aren't eligible for the vaccine. Now, to pivot to your first question, as it currently stands, none of the pharmaceutical companies, at least that I'm aware of, have submitted data for consideration to the FDA for consideration to have the lower age groups covered by their vaccines. Now, that said, based upon kind of reading the tea leaves a little bit, I am hopeful, and other public health officials are hopeful, that that type of process will start in July, and hopefully they'll, I think best case scenario, realistically, by the end of July or early August, we'll start to see the vaccines be available to the younger groups before kids go back to school. And that would be a significant game changer, because again, we would be able to provide an added layer of protection to that group before we release them back to school at full capacity, and potentially in environments where face coverings and other physical distancing measures and public health measures are no longer in place.
Got it. So if I can briefly follow up with you again on the on where things stand now, and do you have an idea of by what date? You said you're going to review the data, take into consideration, the state's impact, et cetera. Do you expect to have an answer for those people who are saying, okay, county health department, what do I do on masks?
Well, not at this time. Again, we're going to do our due diligence to make sure, as we always do, in terms of putting forward those recommendations before the declaration of emergency ends. But in the meantime, I want to emphasize one thing that we've been clear about, even when our own restrictions have changed and the language around face coverings has changed. We still support parents, individuals, businesses, other entities to be able to implement policies that they feel comfortable and feel safe in. And particularly from an individual level, if parents have children who are going out to different places, I would still encourage you, if you want to have your children wear face coverings, to support that idea. So in the meantime, in the absence of formal language coming from me or coming from the County Executive Board of Health, I would still support and encourage parents to do what they feel most comfortable in, not only for their children, but for themselves as they continue to interact within society.
Thank you.
I think it's worthwhile just to remind exactly where some of these, so there are a couple of mandates that are going to stay in place, to be clear. I think the governor has maintained the healthcare facility mandate, so that will stay in place. And the public transportation mandate is a federal mandate, and so that will stay in place as well. And so really the three areas where the county has some more involvement are in our correctional facilities and in our homeless shelters, where I think masks are very likely to stay for at least the time being, given what we know about the risk in a congregate living facility and where we know vaccination rates are not as high as we'd like them. But the one I think that you're getting most to is the summer camps, which the county does offer summer camps. And so, just to give some context to some of this decision on the back end, obviously we've offered, people have signed up for summer camps at this point. And they signed up under one pretense. And are we comfortable shifting to a different pretense? And is it safe to do so? And what does that mean for the parents who choose to participate now or don't choose? And so, obviously we were hit with this decision yesterday, and we're, as Dr. Gayles said, we're trying to do our due diligence to address it, not just from we want to make sure it's from a public health perspective, because clearly the American Association of Pediatrics just opined 3 weeks ago that it's still appropriate for youth 2 to 12 to be wearing face coverings. And so we got to marry that up with the reality of we've had people sign up under one set of circumstances. Now there's a different set of circumstances, and how do we deal with that? And so I just want to give some more context to some of the background conversations that are happening right now. And what I wanted to clearly make sure that there was still awareness that there are still some settings where there will be face coverings requirement that has nothing to do with either the county in some cases, the state in some cases, or where there's not likely to be a change.
Got it. And I know we're coming up on time, but I have a quick question for the county executive. The governor just announced another $10 million for live venues today, relief directed at places like Fillmore, Imagination Stage, et cetera. How important is that?
I mean, these are among the businesses that were hit hardest during COVID, and totally dependent on customers. With restaurants, we were able to pivot. We could do carry out. We could let them sell alcohol and bring it home. There was no way of doing carry out entertainment, and so we weren't able to provide the kind of support. So anything the governor does and the federal government does is going to be greatly welcome, because it's going to help some of the folks who took the biggest hit during all this. So I'm very grateful for the support.
Thank you. And then lastly, Mr. Stowe, where can I learn more about the 5 living legends we're going to learn more about on Saturday? Is there something in advance we can direct our listeners to?
Yes, thank you very much for that question. We will be issuing a press release later today that will give a little information, particularly from a biography perspective, and just how they have been able to contribute throughout the community in their time here in Montgomery County. So stay tuned for that coming out later on this afternoon. And I was remiss in not mentioning earlier that there will be vaccinations also at Juneteenth this coming Saturday. And so I'll make real sure that I got that in. And so persons who have not yet been vaccinated, to include our young people, that would be a great opportunity to make that happen as well. So vaccinations at Juneteenth as part of that process.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Kate, for closing this media presentation. On that note, reporters, I don't see any more questions coming from you in the chat. So with that, we're going to say thank you, good afternoon, and we'll see you soon. Stay safe.
Thank you all.